we have to be very careful of biblicism, of simply saying that the Bible means what the Bible means and pretending that we're not interpreting the Bible all the time. We pick and choose passages, and what's crucial is why we pick some passages, why we don't pick others.
It's important for all Christians to interpret the Bible not from a modern-day viewpoint, but rather interpret passages from a historical perspective. Anachronism, which is something or someone that is not in its correct historical or chronological time frame, tends to happen when people don't accurately interpret the Bible. For instance, the famous painting of the Last Supper shows Jesus and his disciples eating what was presumed to be bread or lamb. But after a restoration of the painting in 1997, revealed that the painting actually depicted Jesus and his disciples eating eel with orange slices, which was a fashionable dish in the 1400s when Leonardo da Vinci painted his masterpiece. Anachronism is also found when people interpret 1 Corinthians, where Apostle Paul describes a type of people who will not inherit the kingdom of God. In verse 9 he says, "Know ye not that the unrighteous shall not inherit the kingdom of God? Be not deceived, neither fornicators, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor effeminate, nor abusers of themselves of mankind, shall inherit the kingdom of God." Many Christians believe the word effeminate, as well as the phrase abuser of themselves of mankind, addresses homosexuality. The reason for this is because Christians take the meaning and understanding of a word like effeminate from a 21st century viewpoint, rather than understand the viewpoint of a first century reader. The word effeminate today is defined as a human male who has a feminine nature, behavior, mannerisms, or style. The original Greek word, however, was malakoi. Malakoi is ancient Greek slang meaning soft and never referred to homosexuals. Jesus used the word malakoi both in Matthew and Luke to describe soft or fine clothing. In Matthew 18, in verse 7, it says, "As John's disciples were leaving, Jesus began to speak to the crowd about John. 'What did you go out in the wilderness to see? A reed swayed by the wind? If not, what did you go out to see? A man dressed in fine or malakoi clothes? No, those who wear fine or malakoi clothes are in kings' palaces.'" Furthermore, Clement of Alexandria, a first century Christian teacher, describes an effeminate person as heterosexual men and women who are obsessed with their appearance. These people are described as wearing soft, colorful clothing with lots of makeup and detailed attention to their hair. It is important to note that in ancient times, lots of makeup and fine clothing were used by high-end prostitutes in order to lure men. Men also took part in this obsession in order to lure women. This would be like a modern-day metrosexual. But it wasn't the clothes and makeup that made these people sinners. Clement of Alexandria describes that their obsession to their appearance was a sign of their weak minds. For he writes, "For these unnecessary and transparent materials are the proof of a weak mind, covering as they do the shame of the body with a slender veil." Clothing throughout history and even today helps to define a person's personality, social status, occupation, as well as someone's personal faith. Malakoi was equivalent to a materialistic person of the ancient times. They are described as people who indulged in sex and vanity. They cared for nobody but themselves. They looked down on the poor and needy and did not take the place of a servant to God, but rather worshiped themselves. Malakoi, throughout history, never referred to homosexuals. It wasn't until 1958 when the translators of the Amplified Bible decided to translate the word malakoi to anyone practicing homosexuality. Let me repeat that. In all of the centuries the Bible has been in existence, the word homosexual was never used, nor were gay people scripturally condemned until a group of people in 1958 decided to put the phrase, "anyone practicing homosexuality," in the Bible. Abusers of themselves of mankind. This phrase comes from the Greek word arsenokoites. Scholars believe this word was coined by Paul himself, and that the word was formed from the Greek translations of Leviticus 18:22 in 2013. Arsenos means man and koiton means bed. The words used together has a sexual connotation to them. However, the passage in Leviticus was referring to shrine temple sex, not homosexuals. Philo, a Jewish philosopher who lived during the time of Jesus, understood that Leviticus 18 and 20 referred to shrine prostitution, in which male worshippers engaged in the anal sex acts with male and female priestesses of the fertility goddess. This Jewish viewpoint is 2,000 years old. It was not invented by gay people as an excuse for sin. It is also important to note that Paul was writing to the city of Corinth, which is in Greece. The most widespread and socially significant form of same-sex relations in ancient Greece was between adult men and adolescent boys, known as pederasty.
Some scholars propose that Paul was not condemning same-sex relations of mutual consent. Instead, they argue that Paul was opposed to the involuntary domination of one person over another.
Paul's understanding of homoeroticism would have involved pederasty, which involves an older male with a younger male, and also it would have involved prostitution. He would have been aware of slave prostitution in particular, so that Paul would not have had any conception of homosexuality as we understand it, of same-sex consensual relations between adults that might be monogamous and long-lasting.
Therefore, many scholars believe that arsenokoites refers to pederasty, not to male adults in a loving, committed relationship. In conclusion, many Christians misinterpret the Bible because they fail to recognize that words written over 2,000 years ago have a different meaning than the way we define words today. Even though the word effeminate has a homosexual reference today, there is no evidence that first-century Christians viewed Paul's writing of Malachi as a condemnation of gay people. Malachi referred to men and women who indulged in sex and vanity. Arsenokoites stems from Moses' writings in Leviticus, which condemns shrine prostitution. And finally, the word homosexual was added in the Bible in 1958 by the translators of the Amplified Bible.
As I say, we're always psychophysical wholes. You cannot separate the spiritual from the bodily. They are both involved in everything we do. So anything having to do with the body becomes evil in Hellenistic thinking. And so, the sexual relation becomes an evil thing then. But this is not the understanding of the Scriptures.
The very first statement that God makes about human nature in the Bible is, it is not good for a human being to be alone. The gift that God gives us, the greatest gift, in order to ensure that we are not alone, is the companionship of another human being whom we can embrace not only intellectually and spiritually, but physically. And I think that sex ultimately was part of God's antidote to the great human problem, so that we will no longer be alone.